Alright, I'm here today talking about the Old Creaky House production. And so, like a lot of the songs that I write, it starts off with guitar. That's not always true. But some exciting updates. I got a plugin bundle from Sound Toys. And so there's this really neat analog delay. It's called Echo Boy. And I have, let's listen to that first. So guitar comes in. Bossa Nova vibe. I'll probably teach the guitar part too. Second guitar comes in, a bunch of other stuff. Only other thing to talk about is there's a decapitator from Sound Toys, and so you can just add a little tone and drive and wet mix to that, and so I put a beefy G, whatever that is, and so it just kind of added a nice low end kind of warmth, I guess. And then the bass and drums come in and a bunch of pads. So I've been told or asked to talk about the drums more, and so let's solo the drums and I'll give a brief discussion about what I do on drums. So let's solo the drums. So this one is very kick and snare heavy, and it's brush snare, just like Isolation was. But so you can see I've got some activation here. That's actually the gate. And also a compressor and some EQ. So EQ here we've got 50 hertz, pulling down some of the 100 hertz. There might be some frequencies I didn't like there. And then a little punch up here at the top. Compressors on this tune were not super necessary, but like I have a little bit going, yeah. So I got some activation going there. I always add 2, remember, because I don't want to have it be super obvious that it's compressing, and so if you do serial compression, there's less of a noticeable result. Okay, I had a little bit of phasing issues, so I added a inverted phase here, and then what else? That's good for the kick. So snare is brush, like I said. And I have got a top mic and a bottom mic, and the top end I've lowered sort of this muddy lower end, and I've raised up the 5 kilohertz, and then a little bit of compression going on. The bottom mic typically is the brighter one, and so I pulled down a tiny bit of the 5K, and I pulled up a little bit of the low end here, and I think the snare sounds pretty good. The toms are not super interesting until later, and of course I panned them to the left and to the right, and I had some reverb. We have a new song coming out next month where the toms are going to be super featured and awesome, but these are, not necessarily the most interesting, but we've got a panned overhead microphones left and right, and with those, where's my EQ? I'm gonna pull it up here. I pull out a lot of the low end because you don't really need it because you already have the kick and the toms and everything. I don't think I had a room mic. Oh no, I did have a room mic. Yes, I've got a room mic over here. It's obviously good to have a room mic. On this one, I put a couple of these Sound Toys plugins. I put a decapitator, so you can add some nice drive to that, right? And so I added several sort of like drives on this because it just adds a nice warmth to it. Very low on the mix on this one. Like if I was doing a rock song or something, I might add a little bit more. Alright, so that's enough for the drums for today. Hopefully that's helpful for some of you. So let's go back and talk about some of the other fun stuff. Don't want to ignore Jared. The bass, I did actually have, it just took me forever for some reason. I had to do some EQ. There was some frequencies I didn't like that kept coming through, and so I had to kind of balance that out.
We've packed up.
I also added some beefy decapitator tone on here. It blends well. Okay, let's talk about these pads. These are kind of cool. So I have this is just like in Studio One, it's called a blade pad. And then I've got a roto organ, another blade pad, real trumpets, real muted trumpets. And then here we've got another building trumpet. We've got strings. And that's another thing I got, which was there are the strings. I got a nicer set of strings. Okay, let's talk about some of the other stuff like vocals. So vocals, I think I have a bunch on these vocals. Yeah, okay, a bunch.
We have packed up all our things.
You can hear that Echo Boy.
And we're moving on.
They have a analog vocal slapper. And then we talked about last time how I add saturation to a lot of things like vocals, and so that's always going to be on my vocals, not always, but maybe. I added a micro shift, which this song does have doubles, I think. Yeah. Actually, this is what I think I chose to do. So I did sort of record a double, but I actually found that putting a micro shift on there. Oh no, I do have a double, it's right there. Yeah, so but the micro shift just adds kind of another cool texture, which is fun, and so I messed around with that. I liked it.
From across the room.
So I had to make a decision with this. Basically, with the EQ, I had to decide between, pulling more of that low end out, but then when I go high, I felt like it was too thin. And so, yes, I could have, moved the vocals down and EQ'd it out and then had, 2 separate tracks, right? So that the first part, but I just chose to keep in the low end. So, I feel like, my voice is pretty low at this beginning part.
You've packed up all our things.
But I think it's kind of nice.
Moving on. You see from across
I added some of this.
Between the boxes and the old heirlooms.
This is a radiator mixer amp, so just again, kind of a preamp that's going to add some warmth, some not distortion, but if I really cranked it, it would add distortion. I did have to add some de-esser stuff, and in Studio One we just have there's a multi-band compressor that does that for you. It's just it's a default, and so I just used that and it worked. So didn't ask any questions, it worked. Reverbs on here, same kind of as isolation, slapback. Yeah, I felt like this was a very warm sort of 50s jazz sound, and so I didn't want to add too much, but I did kind of like that nice reverb in there. Okay, moving on. The cream of the crop, Druva. So Druva sent these tracks to me, and they're just great. So this is the Druva bus. So
we dance in this old creaky and familiar house.
He really just shined on this, right? So we got this really cool backup vocals going on.
We dance.
We got Elizabeth Moss singing on this.
Creaky and familiar house.
We dance
Like it's our last chance.
This tambourine. Tambourine also always adds energy.
Oh, how we dance in this old creaky and familiar.
All right, so guitar solo coming up. The guitar solo.
This old creaky and familiar kind of house.
I just added more reverb, so I just took the exact same sort of guitar, plugins of my rhythm guitar, and I just turned the sends up on the reverb, and that was enough, in my opinion, to get a nice sound out of that. Elizabeth's vocals now.
You grab my hand and swing some more. We can't believe it's our last time through the door.
So I kind of had similar things on her vocals. She does have a little bit more prominent S's, and so I had to pull some of these frequencies down. But the same thing, I just took this multi-band dynamic, and I had to mess around up here as well to get those S's out of there. And then pretty much the same plugins as my vocals. I always tweak because it's not plug and play, but I start with kind of the similar ones.
We raised 2 of our own, and now they've gone and found a new home.
And I do automate stuff, right? So if I expand these envelopes, you know, during the choruses, I'll boost some of the vocals, or maybe like Elizabeth or myself were singing too loud during that part, so I'll pull it down. This took a forever over here. I had to get it just perfect, and so this is the ending over here.
In this old creaky yet familiar house,
I love these horn lines in the chorus. We got trumpet and trombone. There's kind of like a call and response in each ear, which is kind of fun.
like it's our last chance, and we dance. Oh,
The strings are pretty cool.
how we dance in this old creaky and familiar.
Trumpet solo coming out.
This old creaky and familiar kind of house.
I love this trumpet solo. Bunch of great horn lines.
We
Just briefly talk about this, and I'll go on to mastering because I've already spent 10 minutes on this. But so same thing. We've got some saturation. I actually added a little bit more because I liked sort of that almost distorted sounding trumpet. Compressors, Echo Boy on there as well. I just put the default on there, and then I put a little extra reverb send in there. Bridge trumpets are cool.
can barely stand our friends.
Come visit us.
We
All right, so let's move on to mastering real quick. So that's kind of a brief overview. The strings kind of get bigger and bigger as the song goes on, which is good. But let's move on to mastering. So if I go to we talked a little bit about this last time. So in Studio One, I have the privilege to have a project window built in, and so I can go to, spoiler alert, Not Fine is going to be our new album title. So we had Fine, and we're having Not Fine. So if I go to my project, I can go here. I'm going to cancel that because I don't want it to do anything right now. Old Creaky House is my third track right now. So let's look and see what's on here. So should be quite a bit louder. Turn it down a little bit for my ears. All right, so EQ on the master track. I pulled some random frequencies out, whatever I felt like, some of the mud out. I pulled the highs up a little bit. Really want that snare to ring through and those horn lines right. And then I pulled out something around here probably because the bass was a little too reverberant. Okay. I added a multi-band dynamic. There's this nice sort of just stereo compressor, like the medium level, which I liked. And then a little bit of compression here. Major update is that I've got the ozone elements. And so this is a really slick mastering program. And so I actually selected a preset called Tight and Punchy, but then I sort of edited it a little bit for my liking. There is a imager on here, which actually sort of, you can expand the stereo image or tighten it depending on what you're into. And I expanded it about 15.6, whatever that means. And then there is a maximizer. There's been a lot of complaints on like forums online that Studio One doesn't have its own default, maximizer or whatever, but I have it in here and it sounds really good. So those are kind of the basics. I always put serial limiting on my sort of end here. And so I have 2 limiters so that we don't get too much of a noticeable ducking when that audio wave hits that. So
we have packed up all our things, and we're our last chance, and
yeah, so I think the master sounds great. It's taken out some of that mud. It's got a nice crisp sound, and it's tight and punchy. I hope that this 15 minutes was worth your time, and that maybe you learned something or had fun listening to me talk about production, because I have a lot of fun doing it. So have a good one. Peace.